welcome. Today's guest is a decorated retired law enforcement lieutenant, distinguished academic, dedicated philanthropist, sought-after speaker, and author of Body, Mind, and Badge, Strategies for Navigating Trauma and Resilience in Law Enforcement. During her 25-year career as an active duty law enforcement officer, she investigated hundreds of cases involving rape, domestic assault, child sexual abuse, and other forms of violence, and she assisted victims of these traumatic events in navigating the criminal justice system while seeking justice on their behalf. After retiring from law enforcement, she transitioned into academia, serving first as the dean of a school of criminology and criminal justice, and later as a senior vice president of human resources and organizational development. Now, a dedicated servant leader, philanthropist, and mentor, she has nearly 3 decades of experience serving and guiding nonprofit and charitable organizations. She created a postgraduate leadership academy. She serves on the board of KinderVision, and she is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Hecht Trauma Institute. Wow, welcome, Dr. Kathryn Hamel, to the show.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for that incredible introduction, and it is my deep honor to be here with you and your viewers today.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. 25 years. Wow. So tell us a little bit about what called you to serve, about your time serving, and about how you continue to serve.
Of course. So early in my life, I was the victim of abuse. And in that victimization, I found that I needed an outlet and I needed a way to process the trauma and I needed a way to process the victimization. So very early on, I decided that I was going to protect others who could not or were unable to protect themselves. So that started my passion for all things law enforcement. I figured that was the perfect transition from a life spent afraid and fearful to one that I could serve others and make sure that they were no longer subject to being victimized by violent crime and or by people in their families. I identify now as a survivor, a warrior, a daughter, a wife, a sister, a stepmother, friend, and dog mother.
That's amazing. So I love that you took the challenges and the pain that you experienced growing up and that you really turned that into fuel and into your purpose. I love that you answered that call. That once you identified that as being your purpose and your mission, that you dove head first into it, because it is not easy rising through the ranks of such a male-dominated profession as a woman.
One of the things that I learned very quickly is that I would not survive a career on physical brute strength, that I needed to understand psychology. I needed to understand why people do the things that they do. And I needed to find a way to be able to talk them into compliance, meaning that I would much rather talk someone into the back of a police car than try to utilize brute strength to put them into the back of a police car. And so that was really a turning moment for me when I started to find my love for academia and really human behavior and why people do the things that they do.
I love that the why behind the what became such a driving force for you, because I think that is transcendent, right? When we understand why something is the way it is, why people do what they do, then it gives us a framework. It gives us a framework for decision making. It gives us a framework for forgiveness. It gives us a framework for resilience. It gives us a framework for grace.
Absolutely. And, you touch on a really important part about that giving us a framework for resilience. And really, for my personal healing, I needed to understand why things happen. And I need to understand why me. And that was really important for me, that it wasn't necessarily personal. that it was something wrong with them or with him, not something wrong with me. And that while life is not fair and while I did not deserve the things that happened, they actually made me a stronger and more resilient person. And that strength and those lessons that I learned throughout that entire process, moving all the way through the criminal justice process on the other side of it, I was able to truly understand and help others that I encountered during my law enforcement career. I would say that working in special victims was one of the most important times in my career. I spent 7 of my 25 years working special victims cases. And in that caseload, I dealt with infanticide, human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, child molestation, child abduction. I spent time on a federal task force for child abduction response. And those were the times in my career that I truly found healing and processing of my own trauma. And I repurposed myself to be in service of others that were going through those very critical and very traumatic times in their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, my life has also had its fair share of trauma in it. And like you, I have found so much healing in serving others and helping others navigate. And so I think it is exceptionally powerful that you went above and beyond, that not only did you go into a career in law enforcement, but that you niche down even more where you're actually serving the people that you once were, in essence. So I think we're most powerfully poised to serve others who are going through things that we have experienced, because that allowed you to understand them on such a more profound level than someone who had never experienced any of those things. You were able to recognize the looks in their eyes. You were able to read the body language. You were able to hear the unspoken word and to really advocate for them and to help them navigate with empathy, with compassion, with patience. So I think that's incredibly powerful, and I commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I think you and I have had many conversations about life and journeys and things in the past. And one of the things that I believe is so deeply important is to understand that there are things that happen in life that are not fair, and we all understand that. And taking a moment to recognize the beauty and the tragedy that life is, and then finding purpose through your pain. And again, my purpose was lived through serving others who had been victimized. My purpose now continues to be lived through serving those that are impacted by trauma. And as I reflect back on this journey, I wouldn't change a thing. I have spent a career in service, and whether it be law enforcement or in the nonprofit sector, I sit currently on the board of directors for an organization called Kindervision. Kindervision was founded by my late mother, Ashby Sebastian. And Kindervision started as the result of a neighbor who was abducted and killed in 1991 in the city of Oceanside, California. And at that time, crowdfunding wasn't a thing. And the family had no means to provide services for their child. And the police investigation ended up being a prolonged investigation. And we decided to step in to start taking up a collection to try to pay for some of the final expenses for the family. And out of that need to be in service to others during a very traumatic and tragic time, Kindervision was born. And so that has been one of the legacies that I continue on behalf of my mother, but also, again, because of my own experiences and because of the things that I encountered throughout my life. Those were some of the other driving moments that helped me turn that pain into purpose. And again, serving others became my purpose. And now I get to do it in a couple of different ways. And I'm deeply honored for that ability.
You are the author of Body, Mind, and Badge. And that book really seems to be a convergence of so much of your life experience and, of course, your law enforcement experience. Tell us a little bit about that book. Why did you write it?
Wonderful questions. And very early in my career, I was involved in a high-speed police pursuit. I was pursuing an armed robbery suspect, and it was a dark, cold, rainy night. Of course, all stories begin with this. And as we're navigating speeds in excess of about 110 to 115 miles an hour, we ended up, I pursuing the suspect vehicle, we ended up in a very curvy, very hilly area of LA County. And as we navigated these high-speed turns, I ended up losing control of my police vehicle after the suspect in front of me crashed into some K-rail that had been laid out for some freeway construction. His vehicle then careened into mine, and again at speeds of 111 miles an hour. There really isn't a whole lot of time for realizing what's happening, and everything really just went into slow motion. I'm watching his vehicle come at mine, impact occurs, and I'm instantly knocked unconscious by a shotgun that had been behind my head. Back in those days, we mounted the shotguns behind us. And so the shotgun comes and hits me in the back of the head. I'm immediately knocked unconscious. And my vehicle did a couple of different 360-degree iterations. And I ended up upside down on the 5 freeway in Los Angeles County. And interestingly enough, those of you that have had brain injuries prior understand that when you start to awake from a brain injury or a traumatic event that occurs and you have a brain compression, or in my case, a brain bruise, you wake up combative. And one of the things that you're always taught in the police academy is to always retain your weapon. And regardless of circumstance, weapon retention is something that is very ingrained into us very early on. So as I start to wake up, all I realize is that I am upside down. There's blood everywhere. My face was full of glass. My eyes were full of glass. I didn't really understand what had happened. I just knew I was very uncomfortable. I had extreme pain from the entire right side of my body. And I remember an officer from LAPD, couldn't tell you his name to this day, but I will never forget his face. He crawled into the wreckage of my car and tried to calm me down, explaining to me that I'd been in an accident and that I was injured and that I should not move. They were unsure of the extent of my injuries at that time, and that they were doing everything they could to get me out of the vehicle. And I remember the jaws of life. I remember the sounds of crushing metal. I remember the pain of being extricated from the car. And then I remember trying to fight. I was trying to fight to retain my weapon because that's what I was trained to do. And you perform how you train. So I remember them trying to cut my clothes, my uniform, because they didn't know how extremely injured I was at that time. And so when I finally was extracted and I was placed into an ambulance and I was taken to the hospital, I remember being unconscious again, and it was probably a good thing. I had some pretty significant orthopedic injuries. I had a brain injury and I had a heart injury where I actually ruptured one of the valves in my heart. At that time, I was about 28 years old. I was going through fertility treatments with my then spouse, and I really struggled with the physical pain of my injuries. I was admitted to a trauma center. I spent several days in a trauma center before I was then transferred to a local hospital for the remainder of my recovery. And I went home, and it's kind of interesting. Law enforcement talks about this brotherhood and this sisterhood, and I lay down my life for you, and then something like this happens where you're injured, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. That I think was a really difficult part of it for me, was that I wasn't in briefings in the evenings. I wasn't in end of shift anymore when we got off of work in the very early morning hours. And I spent about 8 months recovering. And through that recovery, I would say a lot of the physical pain paled in comparison to just the psychological things. I was told that I would not recover, that I would need a heart valve replacement by the time I was 60. Not quite to 60 yet, so we'll see if they were correct on that. But I do remember just being depressed. I was really depressed. I started eating a lot, started gaining a lot of weight. I wasn't able to work out any longer because I had broken my shoulder, I had broken my knee. Again, I had ruptured my heart valve and I was on heart medication at that time. And I remember very, very, very vividly one of the workers' compensation representatives at that time that was hired by the city that I worked for, came to my door and they said, "Hey, our doctors have said you're never going to go back to work. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What do I want to do? I want to be a cop. That's what I signed on the dotted line for. That's what I want to do." And she tells me, "Well, that's not possible. You're injured. The medication that you're on causes some issues where, the city's not comfortable with you being able to operate heavy machinery or a firearm." And I remember just being angry. I was so angry. I was angry that this had happened. It was one more thing that wasn't fair. I remember vividly telling the representative to leave my home, that I was not going to retire and that I would fight till the very bitter end, my retirement processing, and that I was going to be back. And I made a solemn vow in that moment to be back. So fast forward 8 months, I came back to work. My doctors actually released me back to work. It probably was against their better judgment, but I was very persistent. And I came back to work. I recovered. It took me about another year to fully recover. And I was back to full duty within about 18 months of my collision. And I learned so many valuable points from that recovery process. I learned how to take care of my body, my physical body. I learned how to do rehabilitation exercises so I would be able to retire being fully mobile. I learned about nutrition. I learned about just overall health and well-being and what does that mean? And this piece about resilience, we talk about it a lot, but we don't actually dive in and do a deep dive into what it is and what it means. When I think of the word resilience, I think of the ability to overcome and to come out stronger. And so that's what this book is all about. So Body, Mind, and Badge is strategies for navigating trauma and resilience in law enforcement. The job inevitably comes with trauma. You can't tell me that you can spend a career interviewing victims of crime and vulnerable populations and seeing death and just chaos and illness and conflict every single day and not be changed by it. And so what you do in your off time and in your private moments to be able to be that more resilient, more well-rounded and more balanced law enforcement officer, that's what Body, Mind, and Badge is all about. And I'm so excited to show it to the greater community.
What a perfect time, to release your book. I don't think there's ever been a greater need. The world has really shifted. Life has really shifted. And law enforcement has really taken a brunt of the last 2 or 3 years. There's been a series of events, COVID just being the tip of the iceberg. And so to have this resource, to have your book as a practical playbook of sorts for law enforcement to be able to navigate with actual tools and strategies, to be armed with practical things that they can do to take care of their body, to take care of their mind, so that they can show up as that empowered badge, right? To show up aligned and whole and centered and present, and to be able to then really go out and serve in the way that they are called to do. It's a really powerful book, and I hope everybody reads it, whether you are in law enforcement or not. I think so many of the tools and strategies that you give are really applicable across the board to body, to mind, to health and resilience and trauma navigation.
Absolutely. And while it's focused on the first responder population, you're absolutely correct. The things that myself and the contributors talk about in this book really are applicable across discipline, whether it's school teachers, attorneys, nurses, doctors, stay-at-home moms and dads. It really could apply to anyone and everyone. And one of the things that is also really important to have just across the board is just gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson, gratitude for the journey, and just really truly understanding that we can live our lives by design, and that just because you've been through trauma or just because you have pain doesn't mean that you can't repurpose that and serve others in a meaningful and productive way.
Absolutely. So you touched on gratitude being one tool, one strategy. What other tools and strategies have you used as you navigated all of the different twists and turns and trauma that you have endured?
So, a couple of things that are really important to me. And those of you that love poetry, there is a poem by Robert Hastings, and it's called The Station. And I identify with The Station for a couple of reasons. The Station talks about being present, being in the moment, and enjoying the journey. And for far too long, we're always of the mindset of if this, then that. When I get that car, then I'll be happy. When I buy that house, I'll be happy. When my children graduate from college, I'll be happy. If this, then that. Design your path and enjoy the journey. So those of you, again, that are familiar with this, with The Station, I have it posted in my office. And every day I take a moment to reflect on the message and the meaning of the station. When you get to the station, that is the end of your life. And what has happened in those moments, what's your legacy? What's your dash, right? There's also something called the dash. You know, what happens between birth and death? And how are you a productive, contributing member of your community, of your society? How are you giving back? What are you doing to be in service to others? So I just remember that everything I've been through, all the tragedy, all the crisis, the chaos, the trauma, it's made me who I am today, and it's made me better able to serve those that are navigating similar trials and tribulations. So I'm grateful for the lesson, and I'm grateful for being in the moment, and I'm grateful for the journey.
So really the tools for you that have served as your North Star, right, as your station, recognizing that the station is the end of your life, living in gratitude, shifting your perspective, right? Reframing the events and circumstances, reframing what you have gone through, embracing the lessons, finding the lessons,
Yes.
right? And then enjoying the journey, finding those moments, the moments that make up the experience of your life, the moments that make up your legacy, the moments that make up the vibrancy and the experiences that you have that make life worth living.
There's always something to be grateful for. Even in your darkest moments, there's something to be grateful for. And, you know, living in the moment, that's true happiness. Being present, take stock of where you are and celebrate those small wins. And sometimes you're putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes you wake up and you can't imagine how you're going to move forward, and just draw upon that resilience and that strength and that inner power that you each have, and find your path forward. I don't care if you have to crawl, put one foot in front of the other and just move forward, because this too shall pass, and you will come out on the other side of it a stronger and more resilient, more loving, more capable, and more amazing human.
So you have built a life of service and philanthropy, and really your life has been so molded and shaped by that initial trauma that you experienced, and you have continued now to serve powerfully, and now you are the chief executive officer at the Hecht Trauma Institute. So tell us a little bit about the Institute, about your vision, and about how you serve others there.
Of course. So the Hecht Trauma Institute is a nonprofit dedicated to serving those impacted by trauma by providing education, information, and services. My vision for the Hecht Trauma Institute is to have a positive impact on those affected by trauma. Hecht Trauma Institute is a certified American Psychological Association provider of continuing education credits, and I, along with my staff, build courses that are specific to those who have endured trauma. And if you are not in the mental health profession and you just want to learn something about sleep hygiene, if you want to learn something about trauma-informed nutrition, if you want to learn something about shame and guilt and dissociation and how to process and navigate trauma, then we have courses for you. So our course catalog is a robust offering of really unique topics that relate to trauma. We have several that deal with adverse childhood experiences. An adverse childhood experience would be anything where a deep trauma occurs through infancy through 18 years old. And a lot of people don't understand why they behave in the manner that they do, or why they react to things the way that they do. And so our courses really offer a lot of insight into the why behind the what. Yeah. Why do I do what I do? Why did I respond that way when X happened or when Y happened? Well, we'll help you kind of understand and really introspect and really process those things that have occurred. We are speaking globally this year. We are attending 17 different conferences and presentations where we're going to be discussing topics from adverse childhood experiences to working with survivors of violent crime. I have crafted a course on a trauma-informed approach to sexual assault, and that's for law enforcement, for first responders, for district attorneys, for practitioners, for medical professionals, in learning how to deal with sexual abuse survivors and sexual assault survivors and mitigate their secondary trauma as it relates to getting information. So one of the things that I realized very early on in my career was the manner in which law enforcement questions a victim or a survivor can often re-trigger trauma. Mm-hmm. And I always talk about trauma treatment triggers trauma. And one of the things that we need to be mindful of as first responders and those that are working with victims and survivors throughout the entire criminal justice process, we are very just the facts, ma'am. We are very, I need the information. I need to process the information, and I need to get that information to another party for whatever reason, whether that's a criminal filing, whether that's an investigation narrative, whether it's to treat external wounds or physical wounds. But we're not really great at taking a step back and understanding this person has just been through the most traumatic thing that has ever happened to them. And by the way that we rapid fire questions, because it's what we're trained to do, we can sometimes add to their trauma. And so this course has been, and the courses that we design are really designed to mitigate vicarious and secondary trauma for victims of crime.
That is so important. That work is absolutely critical. And I think it actually is helpful even beyond law enforcement or first responders. I think it can be incredibly helpful to spouses or parents who their loved one has experienced trauma, and it provides a framework for relating to them. It provides an understanding of their triggers. It provides an understanding of the why behind the what.
Absolutely.
And as we talked about earlier, I mean, it's really a full circle moment for you to close that loop, to heal through that child who really then needed to heal through her own understanding of the why behind the what.
Yes.
And now you're able to empower others and give others that same gift of healing, that same gift of empathy and understanding, that same gift of resiliency, that same gift of thriving through their trauma, of growing through their trauma, of reclaiming their power.
Yes.
I think there's so much of reclaiming your power when you understand the why behind the what. And to your point, you mentioned earlier that realization of, oh, it didn't actually have anything to do with me. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't because of me. And coming to that realization and then taking your power back, that is a gift that you are able to give so many around the world. Not only through the courses that you're developing and the speaking that you do and your book and your nonprofits, but just in the way that the ripple effect that you personally are able to have with all who encounter you because of that healing and the gift that you've given yourself.
Indeed. It's an honor to bring this full circle and really, to your point, serve in a different way. So from the very beginnings of my own victimization, moving through helping those that were in the immediate stages of their trauma and their victimization, to now serving them in a different way and helping them understand and process through what happened, why it happened, and how they can thrive beyond their trauma. It's been a great honor for me to now serve in this capacity as the CEO of the Hecht Trauma Institute.
So for so many people who have really had a tough time, not only during the pandemic, but, throughout life, what are some practical pieces of advice, some tips and strategies or practices that they can use to navigate maybe the fear that they're experiencing, or the blame, or the shame, or the guilt, or those inner voices in their head that are saying that it's their fault, or they're not enough, or they deserved it? How can you help them navigate?
So first, I'd start off with, it was never their fault. It is not your fault. Something was done to you. It is not something that you did. There's nothing that you did that brought it upon you. It happened because someone has an illness or a sickness, or they like to hurt others. I often say that hurt people. And because they were hurt, they have now made it their mission to hurt others because it's what was done to them. Understand that you did not do anything to deserve it, and it was not fair, but don't wallow in that. Don't stay in that place. Understand it, acknowledge it, and then again, start to move forward. Do what you can to get out of that place. If you have to crawl out of it, literally or figuratively, then you need to do that. And if you need to take a step back, take a breath, acknowledge that something terrible happened, put one foot in front of the other. Don't turn to maladaptive coping. Do not turn to alcohol or pills or any other sorts of addiction. They're not helpful. They're not healthy. That will only make you spiral further. Again, taking those moments to step forward. Seek out a support group. Seek out friends and family, and be able to accept their love. Many abuse survivors feel that they are not worthy of being loved, or that they shouldn't be loved because they should be so ashamed, or they feel this this survivor guilt. We see that with war, we see it with abuse survivors, we see it in survivors of intergenerational violence. And just really affirm with yourself in your head, if you have to say it to yourself each and every day, I am powerful, I am loving, I am capable of being loved, and I am enough. And take that out and own that. Own that. And when you go out into the world and you start to talk with others and seek out others that have been through similar experiences, start to love yourself. And that would be the first thing that I would say is acknowledge what happened. Don't wallow in it and don't stay there. Step out of it, move forward, put one foot in front of the other, and know that you are worthy of love and of being loved.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of the sticky note. So when I work with clients and they're new in their journey, I'm a big fan of writing down those affirmations that you just shared. Writing down, I am powerful, I am healing, I am healed, I am whole, I am loved, I am loving, I am worthy, I am brave, whatever resonates with you. But I write it down. Sticky notes are your best friend. Write it down and put it everywhere that you spend time. Put it next to the bed, put it on the bathroom mirror, put it by the coffee pot, put it on the refrigerator, put it on your computer. Take a sticky note and put it on the dashboard of your car, but put it as that constant reminder, because I know, at least for myself, at different points in my journey, whether it was abuse or rape or homelessness or domestic violence or any of the different things that I've walked through, is I didn't believe it. So when someone would tell me, oh, well, you're powerful, I didn't believe it. If someone told me you're capable, I didn't believe it. If they said it's not your fault, I didn't believe it. So I put it on sticky notes and put the sticky notes everywhere so that I would force myself to see it and speak it out loud, so that I was engaging that physiology. And then I was hearing it. And I just did it enough times until I started to believe it, until it sunk in. So I'm a huge proponent of the sticky note and that constant reminder. I mean, especially those of us who are thrivers through trauma. Mm-hmm. We've heard for years that we're stupid, that we're not good enough, that we're fat, that we're, worthless. We've had it drilled into us. Mm-hmm. And so rewriting that narrative, taking our power back, taking control, stepping into the life that we desire, sometimes takes practice. So it takes that repetition to reprogram. And so I'm a huge fan of the sticky note. I'm a huge fan of reminders on my cell phone to create those new habits, right? To reprogram that dialogue. So how do you silence the inner critic or those voices that come up with the limiting beliefs or the negative past programming?
So rewriting your narrative is so important. And you made a great point about affirming it out loud. Adult learning theory tells you that you have the kinesthetic, the audio, and the tactile, right? So you're writing it down on the sticky note, you're hearing it because you're saying it out loud, but then you're also speaking it. So you're really addressing all of those adult learning theories. And it needs to be something that is a constant. And so like you, I always rely back on, and I alluded to it earlier, you perform how you train. Yeah. If you are training yourself in your mind and every day you are speaking those empowering words and those affirmations, you will eventually have to believe it because it's absolutely true. And taking the time to look back on your journey and reflect, I am a warrior, I am a survivor, I am powerful, and I survived. And I made it through this terribly traumatic time. And I will tell you that there is so much joy for me in helping others navigate that process. And so for me, that's how I stop the negative speak, the self-doubt, and the voices. that, yeah, there may be a whole litany of things that happened to me. And yes, life is not fair, but look at how strong I am. I designed my outcome. I am empowered now to serve others as they navigate their journey. And I will tell you that the negative doubt and the chatter, it just instantly shuts it down.
So powerful. And again, that's something that the audience can do. It's free, it's available. Practice, practice, practice. How you practice is how you perform. So what is the story that you're going to tell yourself? Because up until now, someone else has been telling that story. Someone else has been writing that story. Someone else has been programming your life.
Right.
So being able to take back your power, step into life on your own terms, to finally become the architect of your life, where you control the narrative. I love the saying, control the controllables. Mm-hmm. That when we are having all of this external, that we can focus and ask ourselves one question: what can I control right now? And you control the controllables. And in that moment, you alluded to earlier, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, one step at a time. In that moment, the impossible and the overwhelming becomes possible, becomes manageable, because you're focusing on what is one thing I can control right now. And the beauty of what we're talking about, of controlling your inner dialogue, of reprogramming, reframing, living in gratitude, is that you get to control your thoughts. That is one thing that no matter what is going on, you can control. It is control the controllables. You can control your thought. You can control then your feelings and your actions. It snowballs. And so having the tools, whether it's on your phone, you mentioned earlier a lot of apps. There's a great affirmation app called I Am. There's so many tools and resources that are free and available to you to use to take control of your narrative, to heal through your trauma, to step into life on your own terms as that empowered, magical being that you are. And so I love, Dr. Hamel, how you are really living into that, and how through all of your programs and your books and your nonprofit and your professional career as well, that you are really empowering people with these tools and resources that they can use. Now, you have been in communities and in professions where you have had people who could mentor you, where you have had people who have been further along in the journey. You've had sergeants and lieutenants, and that kind of thing. What is the best piece of advice that you have received along your journey?
Fantastic question. I would say that it was let go of how you thought your life should be and live your life as it is. Design your life in the way in which you want to have your legacy spoken after you've passed. So I thought my life would be different. I thought my experiences would be different. I had to learn to let go of what I thought my life should be and design my life into what I want it to be, which is what I'm doing by the nonprofit work, by the philanthropy, by the mentorship and the guiding and the development of others, and then really working through trauma-informed expertise to help those that have been impacted by trauma navigate their process and come out on the other side of it a better and more whole person.
I love that. That is so profound, to let go of what you thought your life would be and build the life that you desire. There's some wisdom in that. That is what I like to call a mic drop moment or a golden nugget. I think there's one constant in life, right? And that's change. And if there's anything that we have learned over the course of the pandemic,
Mhm.
it's that life isn't necessarily how we envisioned it. Life twists and turns and it changes.
Mhm.
And so it's incredibly powerful to be able to let go of the vision, the tunnel vision, I should say, to let go of how you thought your life would be, that one way. Life is going to be like this. This is my path.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier, to be present, to be grateful, to be in the moment, to see what is.
Mhm.
I think, and also to be open to the possibility of what can be. And so that also goes to your point of creating the life that you want, stepping into that. And so as we start to wind down here, let's piggyback on that. Let's imagine that you have now come to the end of your life best lived. It is the life. You have left it all on the table. You have lived that life that you've designed. What do you want to be remembered for? What do you want them to say about you?
Oh my gosh, my life best lived. I would want to be remembered for my ability to help people navigate critical moments and pivotal moments for them in their lives, and that I was loved, I was capable of being loved, and that I gave love in return. Um, Leaving all the material things out, I want to be remembered for moments to others that mattered. Was I a part of a moment that mattered for someone else? And if the answer is a resounding yes, then that has been the life that I wanted by my own design. And that is the life that I wanted to leave out there on the table, leaving it all out there for everyone to see and to acknowledge that she helped me in a really pivotal moment in my life. And for that, I'm grateful.
And so it is. And so it is. Now, how can people learn more about you? How can they connect with you and get a copy of your book or participate in any of these courses?
Yes, of course. So, my personal website is www.kathrynhamelphd.com. And on there, you will find all kinds of offerings, consultancy opportunities for those interested in courses and any of the consultancy information or services that the Hecht Trauma Institute offers. That website is www.traumainst.org. We also have a podcast. We are now in season 2 of our podcast, and that is called Life Beyond Trauma. And I encourage everyone to take a look at it. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. It's Kathryn Hamel, PhD. And I look forward to connecting with everyone. Thank you so much for the honor of appearing on Free by Design. Again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity and for your friendship.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for your time. Before we sign off for today, any parting words?
Parting words. Live in the moment. That's true happiness. Um, if you spend your time looking for the station, you'll miss the journey. So embrace the journey, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and you are worthy of being loved and you are worthy of loving. And with that, design the life that you want. Thank you.
Amazing.